Committee to order for April 19th, 2016. And tonight we're going to start with roads. I do want to, hold on one second. I want to apologize to my constituents in the city for missing last week's city council meeting. Having seen and heard about the passage of a $2 million water and sewer fund to fund the first group of streets and full-depth reconstruction. One of the reasons we have finance committees and committees is so that we take our time and we don't make mistakes. And that all the detail comes out and we don't rush to do things. And one of the things that occurred is that $2 million was given out to the mayor to spend from the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund, which every ratepayer in the city paid. Not just certain wards, but every ratepayer. And those streets are only going to cost, even under full depth reconstruction, $1.838 million. So the mayor got $161,040 more to spend, which is an 8.7% overage. That would not have happened if this had stayed in committee and discussions had ensued there. So I'll just leave it at that. But now we need to figure out how we're going to do the rest of the streets. And I've handed out, once again, a package. And that package gives different options. So hopefully we can have some discussion on different options. I talked to Councilor Condon briefly on the way in. We clearly have a commitment to get at least the second group of streets done this year. The question that we have now is who's going to volunteer their ward not to have full depth reconstruction when the first group of streets is all going to have full depth reconstruction. Those streets are listed on the back on page 18. The roads approved were Ashland Street, Julia Street, Cushing Road, Kernwood Street, Clement Street, Woodrow Ave, and Crescent Ave. All had their pipes ripped up some time ago. So there's no debate on whether or not those streets needed to be redone. But the next set of streets, which is going to cost, if they're all done at full depth reconstruction, $2.8 million. I think we need to have an amendment to what was passed so that we don't have an overage in terms of what was given. But on the proposals that I've put forward tonight, once again, they are related to previous things we had on April 5th. Page 2 was the mayor's proposal, $2 million, bonding against it, 6.78, the $2 million's gone. Page 3 was the first proposal, $2 million, that's gone. The Chapter 90 funds, 2017, $800,000, and city reserve, $1.7 million. Then I've started on road projects, 2016. This is on page 4, City Council. And this one I think is important because this gets us those other streets that we didn't bond, that didn't take care of. But this would use Chapter 90 funds of $733,500. The most disappointing thing to me, not having been here, was that there was zero tie-in to what was done in the Chapter 90 funds. So the Chapter 90 funds could be getting spent as we speak, are being committed for next year. Second here is the CDBG funds. This is just like City Council 2 last time, $816,500, some adjustments made. That's on the next page. And then, through the efforts that was mentioned by some citizens, I contacted our controller, Mr. Rannigan, and asked him how much the mitigation funds that the council and the mayor currently has. That's $508,819. That is currently in mitigation funds. That's on page 16. I am certainly willing to donate, ante up my mitigation funds to getting the second group of streets done. That should have been with the first group, without having to go and bond for this. And then a reduction in the scope. I am still willing to reduce the scope on the streets in the second group as well. The streets which include Noble Street, Reserve Street, Field Street. So my ward's gonna suffer while the first group of streets, same thing, didn't. But I'm willing to do this, to get the job done without sticking it to the ratepayers again. Then we go to page 6. It's the same type of thing. Use Chapter 90 funds 790, just giving you different options. CDBG funds of 760, mitigation funds by the council and the mayor, 508,000, and a reduction in the scope back to April 20th, 2015, which would be 475,000. All of these options have a reduction in scope. Option on page 8, again, Chapter 90 funds, 846,500, CDBG funds, 703,500, mitigation funds, 508,819, and a reduction in scope. There's certainly other ways of doing this. Number 10 is the same type of thing. Chapter 90 funds use 800,000. We could use the city reserve if people are insistent on doing it without any of the other funds from CDBG. You could use the city reserve of 750,000, mitigation funds of 508, and reduction in scope. I am opening it up. I'd certainly like to hear people's ideas on how we're going to do this without sticking it to the taxpayers and ratepayers. Thank you. Councilor D'Angelo, I think you had the first light.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And sorry you weren't here last week. I think those of us that were here tried to do with the best we could in that we spent $2 million and we didn't have any flexibility with what streets we could pull in or pull out. So I wish that we had. We didn't put those lists together. The council didn't put those lists together. Those were put together by the administration. And I think that's what you allude to in your comments. Part of the challenge here is, I mean, unless we pick a street from each ward of approximately equal length and of approximately equal construction, it's going to be difficult to keep all the wards on parity so that everybody gets treated equal. These next proposals, I'm fine with. Many of them, because I want to see more streets wrapped up too. I do. And I think these are creative and they're good, and there's a lot of good options here, and I'm certainly willing to debate each and every one. But the reality is, and I got to ask my colleagues this, or at least present this to my colleagues, both here on finance and then the greater council and those at home. The reality is we're going to need 8 votes here. Because the likelihood that what we put forward, and I'm only going on what we've done previously, because previously, I think it was last year, it might have even been the year before, it's a Councilor Matheson's shaking his head down there. we had approved stuff, and it got sent back, or it wasn't the right scope, or it didn't include enough streets here. And then streets that we wanted done didn't get done, and streets that we didn't necessarily want done got done by the administration, either from Chapter 90 or something else. So the likelihood that we're going to send a package that's going to be completely agreed upon, to me, is unlikely. It's hopeful. I guess that could happen. Maybe we have somebody from the mayor's office here who can say, yes, if you pass it, we'll sign it. I'm just trying to be realistic politically, and I don't think the votes are there for that. So now that goes back to my original thing, and what I said is, if we're going to do this, we've got to have more than just 6 to me. We've got to have the 8. And ultimately, I think we would want 100% consensus. And again, at large, I'm interested in, because the reality is, for those of you at home, the reality is, unless your street's been done within the past 5 years, maybe 10 years, and how many miles is that? That's not that many miles. Maybe it's 20% of the city. So unless that's been done recently, the reality is most of the streets need to be done in some way, either the water pipes, either the streets or the sidewalks, or... And I know various councilors did their ride-alongs and, have various ideas about whether we need full or milling, or I'm not an engineer, so I'm not going to second guess that. I'll leave that to others. So to me, it's about the basic things of what amount of funds are we going to agree to? Then, what streets are we going to agree to? And last week, the motion I made, when it was to adopt, I know you weren't here, but for your edification, I think you'd be pleased by this. And I hope the taxpayers are pleased by this. Into the motion, we read the actual streets that would be done. And I would say that whatever, if we end up voting on this tonight, if there's a motion made and we're going forward, that be done tonight as well. And that basically becomes the receipt. Because we've learned from past behavior, and I like, by the way, just to go back for a moment, I like what you did with this $161,040. And at this point, I'd make an amendment to say that we approve the $2 million, but anything that doesn't get spent from this, whether it turns out to be the $161,040 or not, whatever, but whatever that overage is, isn't just used, that it reverts back to the council. I'd make that motion now, and I hope I could get a second on that. In the original motion last week, perhaps we did, we can investigate that. So just to conclude, I don't want to belabor this too much. I would love to tie up more streets that have already been opened particularly. I have a paper in ordinance that maybe we can suspend the rules tonight and take, because to me it makes the most sense. And that would be, take the streets in the order that the age of the pipes is. So we're taking the oldest streets with the worst pipes first. To me, that's the most equitable way to do it. Those are the ones that we know. Forget about PCI index and do we need full mill or overlay or full depth or whatever it is. There's no guessing when the pipes are circa 1900, circa 1910. There's no guessing there. We know those need to be done. So again, that's what I would hope we could do. See a lot of creative proposals here, and let's see if we can come to an agreement. But again, just to recap, I really think we need 8. So to me, it's be prepared to offer the amount and then the streets. And then I don't know how we're going to necessarily, we had testimony last week from our strategic financial planner, Mr. Hogan, our controller, Mr. Rannigan, and our DPW director, and our city engineer, who all basically said that what went out as a package and we couldn't mix and match. So I think we just need to be cognizant of that going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor D'Angelo. To answer the point of information, I did watch it. I don't believe you're correct. You said that he couldn't spend more than that on those streets. You gave him $2 million, and the cost to do it is only 1.8. You should have said, we should have said, you can't spend more than 1.8 on those streets, because the reason we're over, a large part of the reason is, somebody went down certain streets and said, oh, those sidewalks all need to get done. Those sidewalks all. This gives carte blanche when you give more than what was budgeted, when we're trying to save
Sure.
off of the budget.
So I just made a motion,
So-
perhaps I can have a second.
So 1.838, when they give you, this is what it's gonna be, we should have learned, and Councilor O'Malley, you weren't here when this whole debacle happened, so. But we, who historically have been here, should have learned that if you don't give them a specific number and hold them to that number, they're going to spend every dime you do give them and more. And that's all I'm saying. Now, in terms of Councilor D'Angelo and the idea that, oh, we had to do this, there was no rush to do this. We've been sitting on this for almost a year. We could have rebid the streets. I understand why we didn't, but to break up the 2 million off of a whole package meant that you lost leverage with the person who's going to veto. Councilor Condon. Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to kind of, I know that you said that there were some people missing from the committee, so in an effort to update the committee on kind of what happened, I think the thought process that we had last week, I think we were kind of put up against the wall in terms of getting this done this summer. I don't think anyone in the city, our constituents or the mayor or anyone on the council or anyone in City Hall would like to see us miss this construction season. So we did have something to kind of get done. We needed to move forward with this, and that's the reason why we were unanimous in our vote last week. I know it's been said this is the first group of streets, but it's not the first group of streets. This is just the current group of streets. Many streets have been done, dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of streets. What was happening now is that we had 7 streets that had been bid, and were ready to break ground. And if we were to change those bid documents, which is something I wanted to do and I was looking to do, I still think that we can reduce the scope of those 7 streets by 25%. I think that's something that is possible. I think that with that, we were trying to get something done and then also make it open so that there's a way for us to move forward and have that money saved so it can be put towards the next 9 streets. So I do think we were on a pretty quick time crunch, and so I think that that's something that needs to be stated. But in terms of the scope of work, one of the other things that we were talking about was also reducing the scope of work. We also wanted to reduce the scope of work of all of these streets. And that's something that is currently, I believe, being evaluated by DPW director, the engineer, the city engineer, CDM Smith. I think that that's something that we should probably be waiting for. Because if they're going to come back to us with a new proposal for the next 9 streets and potentially even the next 7, I think that it's a little bit premature for us to now start funding more streets when we don't know what the scope is going to be. There's a chance that the scope could be changed. And I do think that that's something that we would have a discussion on, but we need to give the city the time to go and look at these streets to find out which streets can be done as a mill and overlay versus a full depth reconstruction. So for me personally, I think that this meeting is premature. And I would suggest that we wait for the proposals from the city, which would include our vendor, and see what the new scope of work would be. And I think that, for me personally, what we should really be discussing now is, I know there's a lot of people in the audience wanting to talk about the CDBG funds and where we're going to be using those. And I really think that that's been on the agenda for weeks now, and it's something that we should get to. So I would motion that we table this until we get information back from the city on what the new scope of work would be. I'm looking for a second.
Councilor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to commend you for offering to reduce the scope of your upcoming streets out of those 9 streets, because I have to be honest with you. I said to him when I was arguing this last week, I really said to myself that if there wasn't any give in this first batch, it would be probably twice as difficult to get some give in the second 9 streets. But there seemed to be a strong sense to move forward with the work. As you know, Councilman Mallory and myself, we were not here. However, right now, just looking at it, it's 2.8 full depth. I think a conservative reduction would bring it down to 2.1. That would be 25% if there was a reduction in scope. I think that as a finance committee, and it's been done in the past, especially in view of the history that the council has had happen, I think that we should consider bringing our controller in once a month and informing us of any change orders that have been made or requested. And as a finance committee, I would expect those streets, those 7 streets, because I don't believe there can be a reduction in scope. Because the engineering company, CDM, they had basically said 8 to 10 weeks, which I certainly don't agree with. I would have liked to have seen them, if you can't do it in 8 weeks, we're going to hire somebody. And I would have liked to see them both go out. I made that clear last week. I'm not going to dwell on that. But I think it's important that we find a pool of money here to move forward so that the 4 wards, that hopefully we can get these bids done, engineered, at a reduced scope, and go out to bid so that they can get completed in the fall. Work started hopefully, if we can't do 9 streets and get that ready, identify the pool of money and get that done by the fall, there's something wrong, because we should be able to get it done. The problem is going to be identifying the money, but we have reserve funds that we could, based on the reduced scope of work, whatever the finance committee felt was on the number, then we could identify those funds, because to be honest with you, identifying water enterprise funds, it's still questionable doing full depth whether or not those water enterprise funds. I think we're going to have to identify other funds to get this work completed. Water enterprise is for the changing of the water pipes, and I believe it's not for sidewalks. It is not supposed to be. So I think it's real important that as a finance committee, we can identify some funding that would allow us to move forward. Hopefully maybe out of the reserve fund. It's a possibility of looking at CDBG funds for to go out for a loan. That would take about 5 to 6 months. We could identify, if we could identify $100,000, that would allow us to go out for $2 million, CDBG. Now, personally, I'd like to see us use some of these reserve funds. And it's just, I'd reach out to the finance committee to try to identify some funds. that we need to get going on to make sure that the next 4 councils don't miss this next construction season. And if it's right on the money, that's fine.
Thank you, Councilor Condon. Councilor Matheson?
Thank you, Chair. I don't know of too many committees that begin with a 10-minute lecture by the chairman about the vote that he missed, where we actually got something done. And I want to remind you that the vote was unanimous among your colleagues. And for all these proposals that you keep putting in front of us, they're wish lists. You haven't worked with the mayor on this. He's proposed $650,000 of Chapter 90 money. I would love to get more, but your $800,000 is a wish list. We need to work with the 6th floor in order to get some things done. Now, I've heard some people say, you referred to it as the first group of streets. Councilor Condon, you had mentioned the first batch of streets. We did do some streets a couple of years ago. These streets have been waiting. Our residents deserve to get their road done, and we finally passed something that's getting some roads done. I wish you were here. We benefit from having your dialogue join ours. But you were not. That vote has been taken, and now we need to move on to how we're going to finance the next roads ahead of us. As far as the committee having the purpose of not rushing things and taking its time, I agree with you on that. However, for a year and a half, we've done nothing. We've proposed all these different things, hoping that we could come to terms with the mayor. We've been unable to do it. Last year, and I'll check the vote, I don't know, I'm assuming we had your vote on this. Last year, that same group that you're chastising us for financing the construction of, we sent out to bid because they had already been surveyed and designed. All the work was done. These people were waiting for their roads. They're getting their roads done because we took a vote. And mind you, had you voted in the negative, it still would have prevailed. We had 8 votes on this. So I applaud my colleagues. I think we did fine work. And I'd like to add, I don't know if you caught it or if you saw the council meeting and the dialogue that took place, there was a lot of intelligent discussion. And we got an email from the mayor today. And he indicates that we'll be able to mobilize by the end of the month on these roads. And that we passed an amendment as part of that financing that we unanimously agreed that we share a desire to reduce the scope going forward so that we can finish this project in a timely and affordable manner. Now we're all on the same page. So we do need to take up funding for the next 9 roads. That's what we should be talking about. We shouldn't be talking about the vote that happened last week and it's done. We need to work on what's next so that we can come to terms and finish paving these roads, including reduced scope. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Matheson. As a point of information, when we voted on those roads, we believed that the amount was $14 million that was owed, not $20 million. So things do change. And in terms of chastising you, I apologize if it came off that way, but doing the math correctly is critical for everybody. The fact that we gave $161,000 more than the total, that should never happen. That's why this road project is where it's at. To Councilor Condon's point, he is almost definitely absolutely correct in the fact that the estimated construction on the sidewalks in those streets is $543,000. And to the best of my knowledge and the knowledge that has been given to us prior, we cannot spend that money on sidewalks. That means the total amount was really 1.3 million, or a little less than 1.3 million. So we've given 2 million for 1.3. And to Councilor O'Malley's point, we will discuss the roads every meeting that I am finance chair until we get a solution here. Because you left the rest of us hanging. We took care of Ward 1, we took care of Ward 3, we took care of Ward 4. I'm good with that. But at some point, you have to draw a line in the sand and say, we're going to put every pool of money on the table to get this job done. Every pool of money. And we're not going to operate in silos, at least while I'm chair of finance, and say, well, I like CDBG, or I like our mitigation funds. I like my mitigation funds. Or I like that the mayor has to work with the mayor who promised us $1.2 million a year ago, $900,000 in September, and now it's down to $650,000, and the council should just accept that, I guess. We're all in this together, and this is far more important to get done, at least for my ward, which you left out last week, and other people's wards as well. Because we can't wait until the designs come back, because then we'll have 4 weeks or 5 weeks of debate, and we won't get these streets done this week. And if we send something up to the mayor, and he vetoes it, there'll be no time to get anything done. Thank you. Councilor Di Maria.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the time to speak. I am off committee. Just a couple of things I'd like to add. First off, I truly appreciate your offering up your mitigation money, because I too would offer up my mitigation money. And I think that that is a positive impact on our entire city. This road work is not ward distinction. This is a citywide project. So I know it's almost like we really shouldn't even put wards on there. This is a citywide project. I do have to say, last week, the dialogue, the collaboration was absolutely fantastic. I wish you were able to come. I think we really got a lot done, and I join with Councilor Matheson in saying that. And if I was on committee, I would have seconded that CDBG. We have an audience of people here that are willing to speak on this subject. Until we get a bill, a final bill, as they review all these streets that are up next. And I joined the director and the engineer last week with Councilor Anderson and Councilor O'Malley. It's not a black and white thing. Each street has its own individual need. So to go back, take it off the table as a full depth, and look at each street is really vital to this project. So to take time every week, as you have every right to do as the chair, without a bill, without something, it's hard to fund it. So I do believe we should allow our people to review those streets and then come right back with a plan. And again, I too am very honored to throw in my mitigation money. So that's my 2 cents for what that's worth. Thank you.
Councilor D'Angelo.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. So without haste, then, I'd make a motion to adopt the first one for $2.5 million. That calls for 800 from Chapter 90, 816.5, 508, 374, 681, which comes to 2.5.
What page do you want?
That's page number 1. That's scenario number 1A. Road Projects 2016 CC number 1A.
Page 1.
Page 1.
Councilor Condon.
I just want to get this, what he's proposed. He's talking 800,000, Chapter 90,
Correct.
taking away CDBG entirely.
No, that's not correct. CDBG is 1.2 million. If you flip to the
1.2 million, so that leaves about
about 400,000.
400,000.
I can tell you exactly where it comes from. $129,000 comes from housing rehab, what is called loans. That is like claims. somebody comes in and says, oh, my boiler's not working, and we give them the money to do that. When that money runs out during the course of the year, it's done. So it doesn't get the same type of thing. It is not truly a loan. Public service programs, that fully funds the elderly transportation. It does not fund the other programs. It fully funds the parks with the handicap accessibility and whatnot. Planning, administrative, and management services goes back down to what it was last year. Instead of 200-something thousand, that goes down. And then these Section 108 loans are reduced. And then the private uncommitted balance of 498,000 outside of the shortfall and the Carestead Park rehab goes into the fund. So the brunt of it is the 498 and the reduction in the housing rehab and the planning administrative service fees coming down. It's over 200,000 in the current plan. Last year we gave 110 for about 5% of the overall. It's up to significantly more. Those three things are over 700,000 of it.
I don't think I could support that. I think it's too drastic in CDBG. I'd much rather, I like the look of City Council 5B, 800,000 mitigation funds, Chapter 90, 800,000, City Reserve, 750,000.
What page, Councilor?
That's on page 10.
10, okay.
And to be honest with you, the years I served as city council, we never really had any more than $2,000 or $3,000 to work with as a city councilor as far as being able to get things done in your ward. But I don't think I'd have any problem myself in that particular category. That would get us pretty close to $2 million to fund the next road work projects. And Chapter 90's there, it's been offered up. City Reserve, it isn't taking much more than $750,000 out of there. And the mitigation funds is something that, as a city council, we're not used to having. At least I'm not. So I could support something like that. And I think that should get the scope of the work done, which should be reduced into the $2 million range. So, and we're not really affecting the city budget.
Okay.
That was
Is that a
my
motion? Is that a motion?
Yes, I put that in the form of motion.
Okay. Councilor Madison.
Thank you, Chair. One thing that I suggest, I'm going to second Councilor O'Malley's tabling motion. I'm going to explain why. One thing that you, Mr. Chairman, had suggested in the past, which I thought was a good idea, was to key the funding with a list of streets so we know how the money's going to be spent. That is precisely what we did last week. The extra $170,000 notwithstanding, I'm sure that's going to be, in the mayor's coffers for the roads to come. And if not, he'll answer to this council. I think he'll do the right thing. That being said, if we are in agreement, and I think we all are, based on last week's debate and tonight's debate, that the scope will be reduced, perhaps it's wise that we see where the scope can be reduced, what the total cost will then be, and then how many roads we can finish this year, and then we fund those roads at that cost. Right now, I'm looking at, and again, I appreciate the work you did, but we're looking at a wish list. We're simply saying, Mr. Mayor, please come back to us with $800,000 in Chapter 90, and I hope he does. And we're saying, here's one proposal with city reserves, here's another proposal with CDBG, once again, until we know what we can do this year and what the scope is and what the cost is, I don't think we should be voting on these particular proposals. That's how I feel. No offense to my colleagues, that's how I feel. I think we should table. I think we should hear from the subject matter experts about the scope, the cost, and the number of roads that we can do this year. We know that we have 7 all teed up, and we want to tackle these next 9, because I think they're the oldest. I'm assuming so. They're not? Well, that's another question for us to come back and have answered and resolved for us. Okay. They're the previously surveyed roads. Well, then it makes sense to move forward on them. If we're going to reduce scope, we should probably get back those numbers so that we can figure out exactly what kind of funding we do need. And then we drill down on where we're going to find those funds. I know that there's additional water and sewer reserve money, $1.5 million there. I also know that there's about $3 million in the next 2 years of debt being retired from the water and sewer account. Something else to be considered. I think that is on the docket this evening. I'm sure the discussion's going to be very similar to this one. But based on that, I second Councilor O'Malley's motion and believe that tabling motions take first priority in voting. Thank you.
They do, and thank you. Roll call. Councilor Condon. Councilor D'Angelo.
No.
Councilor Matheson.
Yes.
Councilor O'Malley. Councilor Kinnon, no. I just want to say, once again, from the chair, that we've been down this path before. If we do not put proposals up to the man, we will be in the same place when the bids come back. And if the bids are actually, I think you said 8 to 10 weeks out,
That's what.
go ahead, Councilor
They
Carter.
claim it will take them 8 to 10 weeks out, but I'm not sure if they've been challenged on that. And I think they were quite clear last week that that would be the reduction in scope of work. 25% is a conservative estimate.
Yeah, I mean, they gave us the estimates before. Everything on here is an estimate. This idea that we can't fund things or throw proposals out there to get it funded. What you had last week was an estimate on the full depth reconstruction that they've come in with. There's always contingency to it, and that's in the plan. But again, we have a real problem in the fact that you can't do the sidewalks up there. And if you're intent on doing them, you're going to need more funding to do that. And to Councilor Di Maria, it may not seem to you as it's a ward issue. It was made into a ward issue last week when it was split up. And my ward, with my streets, and Ward 5, with their streets, which have been open since 2012 as well, were left off the list. So not to come up with a plan that's ready to go when they come back, doesn't serve my ward, which I'm ultimately here to represent. So I'm trying to find a middle ground in giving up and saying, look, I'm willing today to cut back on the scope. But why in the world should I cut back on the scope if we're going to delay this another year? Because that wasn't the original plan. That's not what my streets were promised. And that's not what anybody else's streets were promised that got delayed. Thank you. Councilor Condon?
I think our objective has to be to get funding in place if we are going to complete the second phase of this year. So that's why I say 800,000, 750,000 and the mitigation funds brings us a little over 2 million. That's a conservative estimate of 25%. If we vote this money, I'm not sure, I probably have to check with the controller, because we are gonna need funds from these 3 groups identified, in my opinion, to put towards with the enterprise money on what was voted last week. Because that's all enterprise money, that's all water.
Councilor D'Angelo.
Thank you. We may want to consider adjourning here. I don't think we're going to get to 8, you need 8 to appropriate, but I'll keep trying. So I'd make a motion then to adopt Plan 3B, which is on page 6, which calls for $790,000 out of Chapter 90, $760 out of CDBG, $508,819 out of mitigation, and then reduction of scope for $475 for the total amount $2,533,819.
Which page was that?
Page 6,
Okay.
Title 3B.
Got 3 motions on the table. Okay. Move on.
Make a motion to adopt 4B, which is $846,500, Chapter 90, $703,500 from CDBG, $508,819 from mitigation, $475 reduction of scope for a total of $2,533,819.
No second? Okay. Move on.
Make a motion that we send a letter to CDM Smith terminating their services, and that we immediately go out to bid to try to start from square one.
Do I have a motion to adjourn at 7:10?
Motion to adjourn.